Ex-cons. What was the hardest prison habit to break after being released? I didn't use a fork for a few weeks, ate everything with a spoon without thinking. It's not the most interesting thing, but I hadn't noticed it, so I'll post it here. Also, taking as long as you want in the shower. For the longest time after I got out, I took less than 5-minute showers. Doing laps. In prison, every time you get time on the yard, you do laps. Seriously, almost every single person does it too. When you get out, it's hard to break that habit. I find myself hoarding toilet paper under my bed. Sometimes I do it without thinking, and I'll look under there and have like 10 rolls of toilet paper. The toilet paper hoarding, a classic sign of post prison life, and you never know when the apocalypse will strike, so you'll need a fortress of TP. Story 2. I spent 72 months in prison for a tragic car accident that I had caused. After I was released, I kept telling my wife exactly what I was doing without her asking. She thought it was funny at first, but after a few weeks of it, she was starting to get bothered. Story 3. Not me, but a guy who worked for me. When things were very busy, I would often get carry-out lunch for everyone and bring it back to the workplace. This one guy would eat a cheeseburger and french fries in 2 minutes. Like, wow. Once I asked him why he ate so quickly. He said, well, I spent 7 years in a federal prison, and if you didn't eat your meal in 10 minutes, you didn't get anything. That 10 minutes often included the time it took standing in line to get your food. Okay, then. I never said anything to him about it after that. Story 4. Constantly looking over my shoulder. By far the hardest conditioning to break, which I haven't and doubt I ever will, is a constant pessimism and cautious optimism. You see, when you're waiting to work your way through court, get a deal, and get sentenced, you will have your dates changed 50 times, hoping for certain things only to be disappointed. And anytime you are told something hopeful, it doesn't work out. As a result, I never get excited for something until it actually happens. When my wife told me we were pregnant, I already knew from her symptoms that she was, but still, you never know for sure till you take the test. I was obviously happy, but because I'm always cautiously optimistic and rarely show emotion, I couldn't feel comfortable or excited until I knew that my developing daughter was healthy. Even then, it didn't really hit me until she was actually born. You can apply this to anything, especially big events, getting engaged, planning the wedding, buying a house, anything. I still hear from my wife how I wasn't crazy surprised or excited to be having a kid. I was. I actually was the half of the relationship who was set on a kid when my wife supposedly could have gone either way. You just can't get your hopes up or look forward to anything until it is here or has happened. I've been home over 7 years now and with my wife for 6.5. She's truly the catalyst that motivated me to truly change my life and to not give any more of my life to the system. But she'll never know how happy she makes me because she misinterprets my cautious optimism and realism for pessimism or indifference. Yikes. That sucks. Now he should show this post to his wife, though. Like, seriously. I'd be like, you should read this, but I do not want to talk about it. Just think on it. That's just me. Story 5. A somewhat friend of mine did a few years ago, and the one habit he couldn't shake was distrusting people. He said that people in prison are never nice. If they're nice, it's because of a hidden motive. Up to this day, he still doesn't trust people who act nice, are generous, or helpful towards him. Story 6. Not an ex-con, but a good friend's uncle did like 20 years or so. His habit was how he ate. Everything on the plate got immediately cut, mixed, and devoured as fast as heck. Don't know why. He always said it's how you did it there. You ate and got the heck out as quickly as you could. Story 7. Staring at sharp things, like there's no desire to use them inappropriately, but you're just kind of shocked they're there and available for use. You might be surprised what qualifies as a sharp object. I remember whenever someone tried to hand me a utensil or something to cut veggies, I'd be afraid to touch it. Glass was the biggest thing, though, just mirrors in all the bathrooms, real ones. I could smash that crap and have a big jagged weapon. I couldn't believe this Italian restaurant had such a dangerous thing in their bathroom. Stopping thinking of objects as weapons is hard. Story 8. Making prison commissary-only food. Everyone around me thinks it's gross as heck to throw summer sausages, pickles, cheese, Doritos, Cheetos, and such into my ramen noodles, but good lord, I cannot stop. And I've been out for like 5 years. Story 9. My uncle was in prison for a while, and we've talked a bit about his experience and how it affected him. He has a hard time not being violent. You never guess since he mainly just sits in a corner and smokes, but he's been out for nearly 10 years and still always struggles with using his words. The guy cannot stand authority. He tells me that it's hard to listen to bosses when you know you're probably smarter and tougher than them. He knows most people feel this way, but he just can't ignore it. He's taken up professional carving so he can be his own boss. He's really in touch with our native roots now on account of joining a First Nations gang in prison. Doesn't talk much. I don't know if that's because of prison, but he really only speaks if he wants to. Not the type of guy who likes to talk just to talk. Doesn't have a lot. He has some sort of abandonment issue or something, so he doesn't want a lot of things to miss if he goes back to prison. For all the time he doesn't spend with people, he's out with nature or doing something in the wilderness. I think it helps keep him calm and feel connected. Nice enough guy, but prison kind of messed him up, I think. And he's going to live his life being slightly disconnected with people. Story 10. I had to completely change my sense of time. I agree with all the people who said they ate super fast, but then we would slowly walk back from the chow hall, any excuse for a few minutes more outside. I made sure I never consolidated enjoyable things. If I had a snack, I ate it and concentrated on it. If there was something good on TV, I watched it. Now I'll snack while I watch a movie because there aren't enough hours in the day, but on the inside, I was trying to make hours and days go away. I've got a good job now and nice, respectable friends, but I still react to confrontational situations more quickly, decisively, and efficiently than they do. I'm able to pull back at the last minute, but it's pretty clear that violence is not a tool in their arsenal. Story 11. One of my foster sons came to us from juvie. Every meal, his arm was around his plate and he woofed down his food. My mastiff couldn't keep up. He always ate back to the wall hunched. Took my wife and I a month to show him no one would take his food, and we had plenty more. Funny part is, he went in the Marines and did 8 years, got out honorably, and is now working in corrections. Story 12. Having your head on a swivel, protecting your personal property in an obsessive manner, and sizing everyone up. When I was locked up, I always knew what was going on 360 degrees around me. Only the last unit I was in had lockers with actual locks, so before that, I had to protect my commie, paperwork, and books all the time. Most people would fight you to take your crap because that is the respectful way to do it, but cat burglars are the worst. They sneak around and take crap. They get messed up by everyone when they get caught. It is code. You want my crap, come get it. Not sneaking around and stealing it. I've been out for almost a year and a half, but I still constantly size people up. No matter where it is, grocery store, Walmart, walking down the street, I still analyze each person and figure out my best course of action if we have to fight. Yeah, prison sounds a lot like being stuck in middle school with all the oppressors grown up. Yo, I'm gonna take your food because I have the mentality of a middle school oppressor. Story 13. I did almost 7 years, been out 2 years. I'm 35, from Wisconsin. Wisconsin has a law called truth in sentencing. You do 100% of your time. There are multiple head counts where the guards make sure that all of the inmates are accounted for. Every morning at 5 a.m., I felt like I was doing something wrong if I slept past 5 a.m. It took me almost 6 months before I slept past 5. Even now, 6 a.m. is still sleeping in for me. It has allowed me to never be late to work and show up every day. I was a dealer with no work ethic and I slept until noon. Ironically, I am more successful than I ever thought I would be because of this habit. I actually just got poached by another company who offered me a 150% salary increase. Nice to see you, new tax bracket. In 2 years, I have become a model parolee. My life is great. I married my wife last September. I go to therapy for a multitude of conditions that manifested while I was a guest at the state. I was diagnosed with general and social anxiety disorder and PTSD. I was out a few months and I had a panic attack. I had no idea what was happening to me. I was literally paralyzed and afraid. I thought prison ruined me. It made me a better person in general. I'm not praising Wisconsin DOC by any means. The guards dehumanized the inmates and treated us like pure garbage with no hope. They always told people, you'll be back. I won't be back. People that go back produce job security. They want people to come back, so they do what they can to steal your dreams. I changed myself. Prison allowed me to step back and really look at my life. I saw who I hurt. I saw who was there for me. I saw who abandoned me, and I became focused on change after my 3rd year. I contemplated ending it all because I wasn't even half done with my sentence. After I seriously thought about ending it all, I committed myself to being the best human being I could be. I revolted by behaving, teaching myself things, and being positive. My life is now amazing. I'm surrounded by people who love me and support me. All of the ex-cons reading this and people just interested in this thread, that label is BS. We are human beings with feelings. We can change, stay positive, and stay hopeful, never give up. All of my fellow Redditors, one love. Story 14. Not an ex-con, but my daughter's father is. He still cannot stand with his back turned to people. He's constantly watching over his shoulder and eats piles of food mixed together within minutes. I try to wake him up from the couch to come to bed and about to get hurt in the face. He paces around our apartment whenever he's looking at his phone or on a phone call. In a restaurant, he will make sure he has a view of majority of the people. In a mall, we walk near walls and rarely be found in the middle of the food court. But in the end, he does it to protect us. He does it because he knows how rough prison was. He knows that the world is not as peachy as it once was and will do anything to protect the ones he loves. Story 15. I've been out for 8 years and I still eat like a dog. Most prisons give you 30 minutes for your meal, but that includes a walk from your cell block to the chow hall, waiting in line and finding a seat. Normally, by the time I actually get a piece of food in my mouth, I've already got a CO yelling over my shoulder to hurry up. It's really annoying going out to eat with people and gobbling up your meal only to be stuck watching normal people eat for like 20 minutes. Story 16. When my dad got out of prison, 10 plus years, we nicknamed him Martha Stewart because he was such a clean freak. His home looks like an IKEA catalog. He has glass containers for his shoes. He wakes up early to iron, wash, scrub everything. When I lived with him for a year, I was grounded so many times over leaving water drops in the sink. Story 17. I knew of a guy who got out after 15 years. He had to call a friend to come and let him out of his apartment. They'd go out, do some shopping or whatever, and then his friend would lock him up for the night. Dude could not work doors himself without irrational fear. He did get better after a few months, but I hear he still has trouble doing things independently. Story 18. Definitely sleeping habits. Still haven't broken them. Haven't slept a full night in over a decade. Any noise and my eyes are open and I'm wide awake. I can hear really well. A raccoon comes nightly to eat scraps and cat food, and I can hear him crunching outside on the porch from bed on the opposite side of the house, roughly 60 feet away, wide awake. Story 19. An ex-con who works for me always asks to use the restroom. I have politely informed him that there was no need to do that. He's an adult that can use the restroom whenever he pleases, but he keeps asking and apologizing, saying that it's hard to break the habit. He even told me it's hard to pee whenever he hasn't gotten permission out of fear he shouldn't be going in the first place. To get around this now, he tells me, I'm going to the bathroom, you might want someone to cover my station, so I think we found a happy medium. Story 20. God, I got out like 2 years ago and I cannot for the life of me shake my aggressive posturing. That's all prison is, being hyper-vigilant and, I'd argue, worse yet, always appearing indifferent. Like you could be kicking it with your friends, laughing, watching TV, but then even the slightest misphrasing of something or a sudden movement will shift the whole mood of the room at a drop of a dime. So whatever emotion you display has to be instantly shut off, and on a moment's notice, you have to be booted and suited. I would return to my unit on occasion, and there would be stuff smeared on the walls from a fight I missed. You didn't look at it, eyes forward, indifferent. Emotion is weakness, and though I was secretly panicking, I had to bury it and put on an act of being a cold person. I got in one fight, we harmed the heck out of each other in the gym area, and if you judged by other people's responses, it was like nothing was happening at all. Many quietly walked away, while others just stood there, emotionless. If it had gone south for me, I could have been terminated in front of 250 people, and nobody would have said or done anything. Now that is true loneliness, the which of like few people in the first world truly understand. Heck, if I got a bad fever in bed at night, which I did several times, even though there were like 6 bunks in my cramped cell, I could have passed away in my sleep and the guards would have only noticed at count. There are 12 guards on duty for 1,500 inmates. Think about that. If someone wanted to mess with you, you'd be hamburger meat before a guard showed up. So that's the way it was. High tension, all the time, mad respect for everyone. Stay jacked as hell and walk shoulders straight on the yard. In the weight area, I've seen John Cena-looking guys say please and thank you for weights to Terry Crews-looking Black Power guys, and they said the same back. That's simple. Your fortune is on your back and in the words you speak. Surprisingly, it equated to a surprisingly smooth system. Once you earned your bones, respect on the compound, you just went through life like a robot and there was little friction because everyone knew the smallest spark could ignite an inferno. So many stories I could tell, but the point is that raw, genuine, brute value has no currency in the real world. People will scoff at you that are the size of your thighs. I get cut off in line at the grocery store. People mean mug from across a room. All that crap is liable to get you hurt in prison, and it's hard to let go of this mentality once you're out. I'm an educated white kid from a rural area, and I was thrown into a metropolitan prison. I didn't have an ounce of aggression in me before. And my wife, who has stuck by my side through it all, says I'm as gentle and kind as before, but my prison mannerisms stick around nonetheless. She's always telling me not to make such strong eye contact with people, not to cross my arms all the time. Ugh. It is subliminal, and I'm getting better at it, but it's been hard as heck to shake. Moral of the story? Don't go to prison, kids, because you're only one poor decision away. Story 21. I was released at the end of November after 3 years, and my biggest adjustment is grocery shopping. In prison and jail, you typically can only go to the canteen once a week, and it isn't just like walking into your local grocery store. You have to write all your items down in advance, so if you forgot something, you have to wait another week to get it, or if you're lucky, buy the item off another inmate. So it is still weird adjusting to being able to just go and get groceries, hygiene items, etc. whenever I need them. Story 22. In 26 months, the only habits I kept were the positive ones, hygiene and exercise. The only thing I wish I had kept doing is reading. I read about 350 novels in 26 months, including the 5 released Game of Thrones books 4 times. My hardest habit to break after release was eating all the damn time just because I could. I gained an easy 40 pounds in the first 9 months of being out. Even when you make a big store, you still never eat good. Story 23. Not exactly the same, but a very good friend of mine grew up in China during the revolution. I took him out to lunch one day at McDonald's, his choice, and he ate with his arm wrapped around his food and literally scarfed it. Being the insensitive, ignorant American I was, I joked and asked if he was afraid somebody was going to steal his food. He looked at me, serious as a heart attack, and said, "Yes. I guess growing up where 1 in 3 people starving will do something to you." Story 24. Not an ex-con, but I have a good friend who is. He says he always has to have his back pointed towards a wall and be able to see all the exits so that he can see who is coming and going and if they're headed towards him for safety. He also is constantly scanning the crowd to evaluate threats as well as making sure that he is friends with as many people as he can be so that everyone is his ally. It's pretty sad, really, considering I used to think he was just super outgoing. Now I know that he's just trying to minimize threats and make sure no one has a reason to want to hurt him. He said that was his strategy when he was in prison for 2 years, make everybody laugh and be your friends while the toughest dudes got your back. Story 25. I used to work with a guy right after he got out of prison, was in for like 3 years, I think, and he became a pretty good friend of mine but was incredibly standoffish at first, would say like 1 or 2 words at most and wouldn't associate himself with anyone, but me being the class clown type, I guess I was able to get him to open up a bit. He eventually told me the hardest part was trusting people. He thought that literally everyone was out to either scam him or try to get him wrapped up in some crap that would put him back in prison. He said it was to the point where he thought some of the new hires were put there by his probation person for the sole purpose of trying to get him to do something to violate his parole or probation rules, or whatever you call them, so he would get sent back. Story 26. For a while, I would get hostile if anyone pointed at food I was eating or looked at it too closely. I also showered with slides or flip-flops on for years. Nowadays, I'm only barefoot when showering or sleeping. A good thing that came from going to prison is that I saw undeniable proof that race has nothing to do with personality, intelligence, or anything inside the person. I met some of the chillest people and some of the biggest schmucks from all races. The pushy Christians were the biggest troublemakers there, regardless of race. They'd come back from chapel on Sundays all wild-eyed and determined to force new converts. And if you're learning a thing or two from this video, please don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos just like this. Story 27. Mealtime was the hardest for me. It doesn't matter if you're hungry. If it isn't mealtime, you don't eat. When I first got out, I kept missing mealtime, the specific time when you are supposed to eat, sometimes only eating once a day. It took me weeks to realize that I could eat whatever, whenever I wanted. I was all alone, sitting hungry with food in the fridge because I didn't eat an hour ago and I couldn't eat until breakfast. A friend took me out to a pizza place a couple of days after I got out, and the waitress asked me, "What's your favorite kind of pizza?" And I honestly didn't know how to answer the question because it didn't matter if you liked it. I actually thought about it and answered, "I don't know," and they looked at me like I was joking. It's been a long time, and I think I've broken most of my habits. I still don't feel comfortable in crowded spaces where I can't track every single person. I still have a hard time making decisions and sometimes need people to tell me to do basic things because I can't just do them. Story 28. Being a recluse. Prison is a garage of a bunch of people that don't want a thing to do with each other. Unless you've lived a certain lifestyle, there's no one there you'd associate with under normal circumstances. You avoid having any reason to associate with fellow prisoners or the guards. You try to find ways to protect yourself from going totally mad. And if you're lucky, maybe you'll find someone to chat with when walking the yard or to play chess with. Other than that, you try to live in a private bubble. It's very hard to shake that when back out in the real world. Story 29. I can't believe how fast things move on the outside. I saw an automobile once when I was a kid, but now they're everywhere. The world went and got itself in a big dang hurry. The parole board got me into this halfway house called The Brewer, and a job bagging groceries at the foodway. It is hard work. I try to keep up, but my hands hurt most of the time. I don't think the store manager likes me very much. Sometimes after work, I go to the park and feed the birds. I keep thinking Jake might just show up and say hello, but he never does. I hope wherever he is, he's doing okay and making new friends. I have trouble sleeping at night. I have bad dreams like I'm falling. I wake up scared. Sometimes it takes me a while to remember where I am. Maybe I should get me a weapon and rob the foodway so they'd send me home. I could fire at the manager while I was at it, sort of like a bonus. I guess I'm too old for that sort of nonsense anymore. I don't like it here. I'm tired of being afraid all the time. I've decided not to stay. I doubt they'll kick up any fuss, not for the old crook like me. Story 30. I was in for 10 months for a white collar fraud crime when I was 19, nearly 20 years ago now. Wasn't a long time, but long enough to start to think of prison as your quote unquote home. Hardest habit to break was the desire to play cards, chess, and other trinket games no one wants to play with you on the outside. I'd go to friends' houses and I'd say, let's play spades, and they'd look at me like I was crazy. I'd play these games daily for hours, so I had a strong habit of wanting to do so. Everyone else was playing video games, watching TV, going out, partying, etc. I just wanted to play spades, man. Also, I now pretty much only eat top ramen if there are no other food options at home. After eating it daily, I just got so sick of it. Mixing crap in like chips or hot dogs in prison was great. On the outside, not so much. I bet he can shuffle a deck of cards faster than a magician now. Those prison card games honed his skills like mad crazy. Story 31. Not me, but my uncles. They work out with whatever they can find. It wasn't common for an uncle to be in our kitchen benching or curling frozen meat. They would also just pace back and forwards in our tiny backyard or do push-ups wherever there was space, including the bathroom. They would still do a push-up wherever they have space, but they have developed normal workout habits. They also eat weirdly. One of them made a pizza for dinner and put the thing right on the rack so parts of the pie dropped through the grill of the oven itself. They still ate pieces of the pie right out of the oven while the rest of us called for a pie. They would also mix anything with their mac and cheese, like anything. They would just put anything on a honey bun, had large jars of peanut butter next to their bed, and had jelly on toast every morning. Story 32. Was locked up for 6 years as a youth. I was a gang member in Los Angeles and wasn't a very nice person in the late 80s and 90s. To this day, I avoid crowds and open seating areas for eating. When I do go out with my wife to eat at a restaurant, I always sit facing so that I can see the entire room, and I always sit at the edge of the booth with one leg on the outside of the booth so I can get up quickly, or on the edge of my chair if I'm seated in a chair. All the while, I'm scanning the room, memorizing faces, categorizing people, threat, no threat, etc. I listen to as many conversations going on around me at once within earshot, trying to identify threats while simultaneously listening to the conversation at my own table. My preference, of course, would be for there to be no conversation at my table and to just eat quickly and in silence. Just the act of the waiter or waitress interrupting me mid-meal to ask me how things are is extremely stressful for me because it interrupts everything else I'm tracking around me. Obviously, this isn't normal behavior, so I try hard to make it all work and look normal, but on the inside, I'm literally waiting for stuff to go down. Another habit I had was when my wife and I first moved in together, she didn't realize that moving around me while I slept was a big deal. I would be cold asleep and she would walk by the bed and just the rustling of her pajamas or her cracking a toe across the room was enough to bring me up out of bed. If she was close enough to the bed, I used to grab her and ask her what she was doing before I even came to, usually with a fist. Thankfully, this doesn't happen anymore, but the first 5 to 6 years of our relationship was rough. When I was locked up, we lived in large dorm rooms with 25 to 30 people in a room, and you were a target for anyone who wanted to gang you up while you slept, so naturally, I slept lightly and perceived any sound as a threat. Story 33. Guarding my food while eating. In jail, people will snatch food. I recall one guy saying, don't recall the food items, while snatching something good off my plate and tossing something I didn't want back on my plate. Before I could say no, he had it in his mouth eating it. So when I was finally out, I was at a restaurant eating and had both elbows on the table and was hunched over, bringing my spoon down and back towards my mouth while eating. It's a great defensive position for eating, near impossible for anyone to take something from you. My brother commented, "You can relax now, you aren't in jail anymore." Really blew my mind. I hadn't even realized I was doing it. It had just become a way of life. Sitting back in my seat and eating normally felt really abnormal. Story 34. I worked with a group of ex-cons who would sit in a star pattern with their backs to the corner as far as they could without making a conscious decision to do so. I only noticed it when I went to go visit my grandmother and lost her in an empty Burger King. She had sat behind the only post because she survived a war in her home country. From then on, I noticed she would always sit hidden, preferably next to load-bearing support, even if her back was to the door, which was extremely opposite of the ex-cons I worked with. Story 35. I just spent 19 months hanging out with my fiance who did 10 years, and the things I've noticed are that he tends to wolf down his food really fast because they force you to eat in like 5 minutes. He also tends to have a habit of knocking on the table when he gets up, which is their signal to say, I'm done and I'm leaving the table. He also has really aggressive reflexes and can respond to the slightest things in an overly in your face manner. I've been working with him on this and other things, which seem to be things that were programmed into him in prison, but don't really work on the outside, and especially in a relationship. I've also noticed whenever we're watching a program, he will make really crude remarks as if he's still hanging out with all the guys. I guess whoever can cut up the best during the movie gets the most attention, and he definitely comes up with some good ones, but none of them are something a female really wants to hear. He also tends to drag everything out and doesn't mind wasting a ton of time because that's all you have to do in there. But in the real world, you have very little time because you have work to do and do other things. So sometimes he really tends to run up a lot more time than he should and not get to the things that are worthwhile. It's as if he's become a hermit that likes to create projects to peddle around with just to make the time pass, but he doesn't realize that he doesn't have 10 years to burn up any more time. Time is now limited. There's also a tendency to be hyper-territorial over every tiny bit of property that he owns, even if it's the smallest thing that's insignificant to other people. He says in there, you only get this tiny little bit of space, and I can imagine that the smallest things become huge in there because that's your whole world. But when you're on the outside, you just can't sweat so much of the small stuff as you do in there, or it really becomes annoying. He also came out with a really hostile attitude about certain things. Not that he is at all unkind to people. He will stop and help someone who is stuck in traffic with a broken down car or needs help no matter what race they are. But his mental state is different in those regards, and that is also something I have had a lot to say about, and he has improved a bit. If you understood the culture and the pressures in there, it makes total sense, but on the outside, it's not so welcome. Story 36. Having zero tolerance for stupid crap took a while for me to ease up on. Standing too close, not saying excuse me when you bump into someone, etc. A lot of what is considered common courtesy out here are essentially rules inside. If I follow them, you have to also. Even now, I sometimes feel like I'm going from 0 to 100 when someone cuts in line or stands too close at the store. More than 20 years have passed, and I still need to consciously reach out and remind myself that some people have the clue that they're only thinking about themselves. Story 37. Being pessimistic, nothing good happens in prison. Sure, you get commissary once a week, but between the court dates, ever changing terms of your sentence, and general prison atmosphere, it's easy to lose hope. I'm a year out of the system and about 3 years out of incarceration, but even once you're out, it's not easy. Try finding a job with a felony background. Once you get a job, try making it to work every day without a car. Then when you've decided you're 25 and shouldn't still live with your parents, try paying rent, along with all of your court fees and other bills, on a restaurant worker's wages. Oh, and did I mention the difficulty that comes with trying to socialize with people who are cautious to associate with you because of your past? I got into some dumb crap when I was a kid and accepted what comes with that, but god dang it, I never knew it'd be this hard. Story 38. I served just under 14 and a half years from 95 to '09, 8 of which were spent in administrative segregation, solitary confinement. That's enough time to ingrain some habits. I've been out almost for 9 years. Still, I eat fast, awaken once every 45 minutes or so just to look at the time or my surroundings, and I am pretty meticulous about my hygiene and cleaning. Nobody complains about my speed eating, but it doesn't go unnoticed. My friends and family worry about the sleeping thing's impact on my health, but it's the new norm for me. I kind of forget what sleep was like before I got like this, and I don't really care much to bother trying to change it, and nobody minds my cleanliness, especially my girlfriend. I know I've overcome the urge to eat with a hand on my knee, to knock on the table when I finish and get up to leave, and I don't hoard toilet paper anymore. Story 39. As a correctional officer, I find a lot of this interesting as quite a few of these habits carry over onto our lives. Not to diminish what is being said, I was able to go home every day, and my experiences were in a completely different spectrum. It is kind of insane how much being just a guard changes you as a person. I can't relate to a lot of the physical stuff, sleeping, eating laps, etc., but the emotional stuff, yeah. When I got a job in the free world after quitting due to rank, I had major issues with fitting in with normal folk. The attitude of don't take crap stuck. I didn't trust management. I couldn't let slights just pass. I nearly got fired from my first job after telling my manager to catch a square. All the man had done was belittle me, and I was going to hurt him to make a point. The other thing that still gets to me is when someone calls me boss, it is like I am suddenly on edge again, eyes on everyone around me and trying to recognize the guy talking to me. I don't know if he knows me or if there was some slight that had been building up. I'm just ready to throw down over a simple title. It bothers me quite a bit, especially when my family or children are around. Story 40. I was at the bar about a month ago and was talking to this guy while smoking a cig on the patio outside. He seemed cool enough, and about 5 minutes into our conversation, he kept squirming around like a kid does when they have to whiz. He then explained to me that he had to whiz, so I responded with, dude, just get up and whiz. He then began to ask me permission to go over and over, and when I laughed and asked, are you serious? Just freaking go. This happened about 5 times back to back before he began to explain to me that he had only been out of prison for a week and was strongly institutionalized. Had to ask people in public if he could use the restroom and would hold it for hours, much harder at a bar. Story 41. Spent time in the county for something I didn't do because of the we got called for a disturbance, so you're going to be arrested on yada yada yada, which you can fight but will not win against the county for. Setup. Never been in jail, knew nothing about it. Made the honest mistake of not walking literally right up against the wall, but maybe 6 to 8 inches away. Got yelled at by the CEO for being too far out. Immediately said, yes sir, sorry sir, and promptly went to move closer to the wall. Never made it, got yanked by the collar and thrown to the floor and beat with a nightstick while being screamed at for speaking without being asked to, just for complying. To this day, I subconsciously sit close to walls on hallways and don't speak much unless being spoken to. Story 42. Got a 10-year sentence with 9 suspended and 1 to serve. I got out last May. The first month that I got out, I gained a crap ton of weight eating all the food that I wasn't able to eat before, such as pizza, ice cream, etc. I guess some of the hardest habits to break were just generally not trusting people and remembering that I'm back in society and a different set of rules apply. I would say that I've mostly returned back to normal now. The people commenting that they're still having a hard time breaking these habits must have served a much longer time than I did. I would say it only took me a few months to kind of get the feel for being out in the world again. I will say this though, to this day I don't like the word witch and would probably still fight at the drop of a hat if someone were to call me that. Story 43. Not me, but my aunt. She came to live with us instead of having to stay at the halfway house. I purposely didn't arrange anything because I wanted her to make her own space, so we brought her stuff in and I decided to help her unpack her bathroom stuff. I'm joining on and showing her where things are. I don't even notice that she has stopped moving. Suddenly, she starts crying. Basically, you have to be super protective of your stuff, and those things are really the only personal possessions you have. She apologized all the time. She cleaned like crazy to earn her keep. No matter how much we assured her that she was fine and not a burden, she felt bad. And then one day, she was just more relaxed, and then it was home. She has since moved out, but has a key and comes over in between shifts. I had no idea how mentally taxing freedom would be. Story 44. My husband spent time in jail before we got together. The first night I spent the night at his house, I almost got decked in the face. I had to leave the next morning for work and gently caressed his arm to wake him up and say goodbye. He put his arms up in the air with his fist balled and looked at me with a rage I had never seen. Luckily, he snapped out of it and realized he was looking at me before I got laid out. I don't think I would be alive today to talk about it otherwise. This almost happened on another occasion before I learned my lesson, and after a while of dating and now being married, luckily he doesn't have that habit now. Story 45. My brother pretty much came of age coming in and out of county detention facilities. I'm sure he's always had oppositional defiant disorder. He has been diagnosed with bipolar disorder. I'm sure he is schizophrenic or suffers from some form of it. The whole idea of him remaining dominant due to having to exert that position in lockup carried over and has really messed with our family for years now. My parents are only getting older, and there are no signs of him realizing that he needs to learn to take care of himself. Due to the way he grew up coming in and out of detention facilities, it is really hard to get him to understand the type of responsibilities he needs to learn in order to reduce the burden on our parents. His disorders have been worsened by the PTSD that was a result of him going in and out of being locked up. My family's not sure what to do about the situation, and it seems to be getting worse. The prison system, at least the American prison industrial complex, really does a poor job to rehabilitate offenders. It does cause and exacerbate mental disorders, and these folks are kind of just thrown away to live on the fringes of society. I really think it breeds cyclic socioeconomic conditions, and no one that could get the ball rolling on addressing this issue is ready to have that conversation. In short, it's just really messed up. Thanks for bringing up the subject, though. At least we can engage in the discourse. Story 46. My main 2 things revolve around food. It's been 12 years now, and I'm still super weird about throwing any food away. When I was in jail before I was sentenced and went to prison, they gave you very little food. You ate every bite, and you hustled to get honey buns and soups to snack on in between. Every day pretty much revolved around food, and to this day, I don't want to waste any. Also, someone else's comment on here made me realize that to this day, I still won't reach over top of someone else's plate of food. The healthy habit I've maintained to this day, though, it's working out. I want to add that in prison the portions were better, but that year in jail while I was going through the courts before I was sentenced really did a number on how I view food. It's interesting that I've never really thought about it until just now. And if you learned a thing or two from these stories, here's more for you. YouTube thinks you're going to love this. I'll catch you in that video.